Well, oh geez, I almost tripped coming up the stairs. That would have been a great start, huh? Welcome to church. I trust everyone's sunburn is still painful, as is mine. Stayed out a little bit longer than I anticipated in the sun on Wednesday. I know why they give here's a secret for you. I know why they give you these little bottles now, because if you ever notice, we had a friend visit maybe like a year or two ago, and he's texting me the whole service. Look at Pastor Jim. He puts the water to his lips. I just took a drink, but Pastor Jim doesn't take a drink. So a little secret: if you watch Pastor Jim next time he's preaching, you'll notice that he barely ever sips his water. Just a little. So now we've got these little bottles, and we'll see how it goes. So I noticed on Facebook a lot of churches in the summer, they do this At the Movies series. Have you seen this? Where they go through kind of the big blockbuster movies, and they find God in the movie, and then they pull out messages from the movies that are the big blockbusters of the summer. One of the pastors, a friend of mine, said that they're modern day parables. I don't know about that, but one of my favorite movies is called Back to the Future. Has anyone seen Back to the Future? And I was hoping to get a little hoverboard up here, but they're a little expensive and actually don't really exist. But I thought it would have been a cool prop to have a hoverboard. And I remember growing up always wondering, why is it called Back to the Future? I never understood why the name of the movie was Back to the Future. And then I realized, well, he went to the past to correct some wrongs, and the whole movie's trying to get back to the future, which was really his present. And I didn't really understand that for a long time. And a lot of us wish we had that DeLorean, the time machine, right? We would all want to go back. Oh, man, there's so many things in my past that I would love to go back and correct or change and do right. It's almost the, I was just thinking of, did everyone see the TV show with Scott Bakula? He went back in time to fix what once went wrong. Oh, what was that called? I just thought of it. Quantum Leap. I love that show. When I was growing up, that was like the best show ever. Anyways, the message for today is the God of my yesterday, seeing God in the past and how he directs our steps for where we are today and for the future. And it's really a message on trust. It's a message on trusting God to direct our path, to give us the steps that are necessary for his will to be accomplished in our life. And I want to read from John chapter 11. It's kind of a long story. It's the story of Lazarus. Most of us know it, so I'm going to skip some of the verses here, but I want to read it before we get started. So it says, "Now a certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. It was the Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. So the sisters sent word to him, saying, 'Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick.' But when Jesus heard this, he said, 'This sickness is not to end in death, but for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified by it.' Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was sick, he then stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to the disciples, 'Let us go to Judea again.' The disciples said to him, 'Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you, and are you going to go there again?' Jesus answered, 'Are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble, because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles, because the light is not in him.' This he said, and after that he said to them, 'Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go so that I may awaken him out of sleep.' The disciples then said to him, 'Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will recover.' Now Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought that he was speaking of literal sleep. So Jesus then said to them plainly, 'Lazarus is dead, and I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him.' Therefore Thomas, who is called Didymus, said to his fellow disciples, 'Let us go, so that we may die with him.' So when Jesus came, he found that he had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Then we'll skip a couple verses in verse 21. Martha then said to Jesus, 'Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died.' And then skip a few more down to verse 30. Now Jesus had not yet come to the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. Then the Jews who were with her in the house and consoling her, when they saw that Mary got up quickly and went out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. Therefore, when Mary came where Jesus was, she saw him, fell at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and was troubled, and said, Where have you laid him? They said to him, Lord, come and see. Jesus wept. There's the famous verse. So the Jews were saying, see how he loved him? But some of them said, could not this man who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man also from dying? So Jesus said, being deeply moved within, came to the tomb. Now it was a cave, and a stone was laying against it. Jesus said, remove the stone. Martha, the sister of the deceased, said to him, Lord, by this time there will be a stench, for he has been dead for 4 days. Jesus said to her, did I not say to you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they removed the stone. Then Jesus raised his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but because of the people standing around, I say it, so that they may believe that you sent me. When he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And that's where we'll end. It's a long passage. Let's bow our heads in prayer real quick. Lord, we thank you for your presence here today. We invite you, and we know that you're here. We ask that you would speak to us, that you would challenge us today, and that you would that we would just open our hearts to hear from you in Jesus' name. Amen. Do you ever notice how some people's lives, especially today in the modern technology world, it's like a highlight reel? So you're seeing all the good things and all the things that they're doing, and wow, that looks like a really, really exciting life. But you don't see the in-between, you just kind of see the highlights. For some of us, it might be lowlights, I don't know. But for example, my highlight reel would be I went to high school, I was homeschooled. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Then I went to Elam. I went on to Southeastern, I worked for ACM, then I met Lori. But there's all these things in between there, right, that God is directing our paths. I remember when I was at Southeastern, I was doing an internship, and I was speaking at the church that I was interning with. And just all of the things that had brought me to that point was just, it was just amazing to see where my life had come from to where I was when I was there, and even where I am today with my wife Lori, to think where I would have been without the direction of the Lord. But wouldn't it be great if we had, if God was a God that would kind of, like the great physician, we call God the great physician, but wouldn't it be great if he was just like, oh, well, here's the problem. You take 2 of these pills and you'll be all set tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like, that's what we want. We live in this certainty society. We want that certainty. We want it today. And we want to know what's coming next. We want God to say, well, if you go to the doctor, you just need some Ritalin, and then there you go. Or or the problem isn't that your shoe size is too small. You just got to clip your toenails. That's all the problem, and you're ready to go. But sometimes it's true, right? Sometimes we wish God was like that Google Home. Does anyone have one of these Google Home things? God bless you if you do. I do not want one of those in my home. I'm a little paranoid, I know, because it's always listening and everything else. But Google, Google knows what you want before you even know what you want, right? Like even in the Google search menu, you type in the Google search menu, and 5 different things are popping up, and you're like, oh yeah, it's the top one right there. That's exactly the question that I was asking. It's creepy, right? That Google knows exactly what we want even before we do. And sometimes we want that direction from God, right? We want to know the specifics. We want to know step 9 through 32, and we're on step 7. And that unfortunately isn't the way it works. We have to have a trust in the Lord, and he wants us to have that trust. And sometimes he just gives us that one step at a time. But then there are the people that kind of use God as a crutch, because they say, oh, well, God told me to marry them, or God told me to do this or that, and they blame God. They use him as a crutch because they can blame God now for for the lousy circumstances they're in, right? And unfortunately, sometimes that gets projected onto us too, because we see God through a lens or an image of what people have portrayed God to be rather than who God really is. They project humanity's imperfections on God and blame God for our lousy circumstances. Because we see these people who are like, oh, well, God told me to wear purple to church today because of blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you're just a little crazy, I think. But here's why we can trust God in our life. He orders our steps. The steps that he gives us are in a specific order, and he gives us exactly what we need at the exact time that we need. If we look at Psalms chapter 37, verse 23, it says, "The steps of a man are established by the Lord, and he delights in his way." And sometimes we can be worried about the what instead of the why. So we're, a lot of people relate this to like baking cookies or a cake or something. We're worried about the ingredients that are going into the cake or the cookies. But we're worried about the wrong thing. See, the why is what we should be concerned about. And the why isn't the end result. The why isn't the cake, it's not the cookies, it's not whatever we're trying to make. The why is because I'm following and trusting the Lord for my life. That's what the why is. The why isn't the end result. The why is the Lord's will being fulfilled in my life. And the other thing too is when you ask God for certain things, we've got to be willing to submit to his sovereignty into the way that he's willing, or that he's giving us the ingredient, the way that he wants his will to work out in our lives. We've got to be willing to submit to the way that he wants us or the way that he wants to give us those steps and the order that he wants to give them in. Sometimes the order doesn't make sense. And sometimes he only gives us one step at a time. I remember growing up playing Super Mario Brothers. Anybody play Super Mario Brothers? I've never played that game all the way through because there's a warp to the end of the game. So in like level 2, I can get all the way to level 8 if I just go through this little secret passageway and skip all the rest of it. And sometimes that's what we want to do, right? God's giving us step 1, step 2, step 3, and we're like, no. We're just going to go right ahead on to step 8. And God's like, well, that's a mistake. So he's really trying to protect us. He's trying to direct our steps. Jesus told the disciples to wait for the Holy Spirit. If we look at Acts chapter 1, verse 4, he said, gathering them together, he commanded them not to leave Jerusalem, but to wait for what the Father had promised, which he said, you heard from me. See, the disciples are, at this point, Jesus has ascended to heaven. He's died. Everything is great. And the disciples are like, all right, let's go. We've got a message to preach. We've got a gospel to spread. And Jesus says, no, wait in Jerusalem until I give you the next step. See, sometimes we're on step 11, and step 12 is right there, and we could see it in front of us. It's within arm's reach. But God's telling us to wait. Wait for his direction. Wait for him to tell us when to step out. See, a lot of us are excited because we can, we're on step 1, and the next step might be a promotion. Yeah. Or a raise. Yeah. But here's the thing. Sometimes the step is an uprooting. And so instead of stepping like this, God's telling us, nope, we're going to uproot you a little bit. We got some things to work on. We're going to tear your life, not apart, but we're going to. What? Oh, I thought I was getting, direction from the other director in my life. So sometimes we're excited because God's given us a promotion, or we're getting that those bills paid, or a raise, or what have you, and so we're moving in the right direction. What we think, right? But other times God's telling us, no, that's got to be uprooted. That's got to be removed. So I'm still stepping in the right direction, but it may not be in the direction that I think God's taking me. Sometimes it can feel like an afterthought, like God, what are you doing? You heard that Lazarus is sick, and now you're staying there for 2 more days? Like, what are we doing here? Both Mary and Martha, both of them, sisters of Lazarus. If only you had been here, our brother wouldn't have died. God, if only you had told me I wouldn't have gone in that direction. Sometimes we focus on the past because of the mistakes that we ourselves have made. The very next verse in Psalms chapter 37 is verse 24. So Psalms 23 says, "The steps of a man are established by the Lord, and he delights in his way." And then Psalms 37:24, the very next verse says, "When he falls, he will not be hurled headlong, because the Lord is the one who holds his hand." Sometimes we think our mistakes can negate us from the will of God in our lives. And it's not true. You know, everybody's heard the phrase, hindsight is 20/20. Oh, if I had only known how horrible this would have been, I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have taken that job, or I would have taken that job, or gosh, if I had known that the ending to Lost didn't answer a single question, I would have never watched the series. If I had known that what my wife asked me to do was supposed to be done while she was out, instead of waiting for her to get back and remind me, I would have done it when she wasn't there. I would have had to redo it probably, because I would have done it the wrong way, but that's beside the point. If only I didn't tell my brother, or he didn't find out that I don't like a certain sparkly substance, I wouldn't get letters in the mail all the time filled with it. Yeah. Still haven't figured out how to get them back yet, but it'll be good. See, the nice thing is the Lord goes before us. See, where we are today, he was there yesterday. We look in Exodus chapter 13, verses 21 and 22. The Lord was going before them in a pillar of cloud by day to lead them on the way, and in a pillar of fire by night to give them light, that they might travel by day and by night. He did not take away the pillar of cloud by day, nor the pillar of fire by night from before the people. See, the Israelites hadn't been there yet. Everybody knows the story of the Exodus. They hadn't been to the promised land. The only way they knew how to get there was because God was there before them. God was showing them the way. And a lot of times we feel like the darkness is closing in around us, and all we can see is that light, the pillar of light. The only thing that we can see, we feel like nobody's with us. Where did everybody go? It's just darkness. But we can still see the pillar of fire, and the Lord directing us. The hard part is just walking and trusting in him. So there was a pillar of cloud to guide them by day, but they were also guided by night when all else seemed lost. And sometimes it can feel like I said before, like we're an afterthought. If we focus on the yesterday rather than view the past through the lens of the future, we can lose appreciation for the journey that brought us here. The Israelites were wandering in the desert for 40 years. But look at if you read the story, there was miracle after miracle after miracle that happened through that 40-year journey. And sometimes we can lose appreciation for the journey that the Lord directs our paths. He's not surprised. He knew Lazarus was going to be dead. He told them, "Listen, Lazarus is sick." And they're like, "Well, we'll just wake him up." No, dummy, he's dead. Like, we we got to go there and revive him. He'd been dead and buried for 4 days by the time he gets there. And when they tell him he's sick, Jesus is like, well, yep, we're going to stay here. We got something going on. We're going to stay here another 2 days. Sometimes we don't understand why we're told to wait. And Jesus says that it's basically that the Son of God would be glorified in verse 4, that he gets the glory. You know, the most interesting part that I found in this story was the Thomas, right? In verse 16, when Thomas is like, well, we're going back to Judea where they just tried to stone us or whatever. They just kind of, you get this image of like this frustrated, like ho-hum disciple that just throws his hands up into the air and says, all right, well, I guess we'll go there and die too. Sometimes our biggest revelation can be in the place that we're most afraid to go. In our mind, it's all over. History repeats itself. You've heard that phrase before, right? History repeats itself. We were just there. We were just being stoned, and now we're going to go back there? Especially after Lazarus is already dead. Like, what are we thinking? We've seen the past, but we oftentimes miss the work of the Lord in it. We sometimes expect God to rescue us. And what we really mean by rescue is we want an escape, right? We want to just get out of the situation altogether. We don't see the value in some of the situations that we've been put in, that God's put us in. When God's trying to teach us, and oftentimes he's saying that the situation is exactly the thing that's going to bring about my will in your life and the lives of others. See, Jesus says he's glad that he wasn't there. He's glad that it happened and that he wasn't there, so that he could be glorified, that you would know that he was sent from God and that he was the Son of God. And God will allow you to go through situations you don't understand to bring you to the place where he needs you to be. We've got to trust his plan and not our plan. And I know that's much easier than said than done. But that's really what it boils down to. We've got to trust that all things work together for the good of those that love him. And sometimes we need God to do a new thing. He's gotten us this far and directed our steps, but we need something new. We need a refreshing. And Isaiah 43, verse 16 through 19 says, "Thus says the Lord, who makes a way through the sea and a path through mighty waters, who brings forth the chariot and the horse, the army and the mighty men. They will lie down together and not rise again. They have been quenched and extinguished like a wick. Do not call to mind the former things or ponder things of the past. Behold, I will do something new. Now it will spring forth. Will you not be aware of it? I will even make a roadway in the wilderness, rivers in the desert." See, God's not hindered by our circumstances. He's not hindered by where we're at, by our situation. If you remember the cloud the size of a man's fist that brought forth the rain, he'll bring rivers in the desert and roadways in the wilderness. One of our biggest hindrances for us to move forward from our past to what God is currently doing is comparison. Right? So we oftentimes, especially like I was saying earlier, especially in today's society with all the social media, and just being bombarded with Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and all these other things, we compare ourselves to those around us. Well, if only I did it the way that they did it, then I would be, the CEO of the company here. If only I did it the way they did it, then I wouldn't be in this mess. If only I did it the way they did it, then I would be happy, be content, be where I'm supposed to be. And then we compare ourselves to the past. Judah, again, was the place where the Jews had just tried to stone Jesus. Thomas says, if we go there, we'll die too. But God's going to do something new. He's bringing to life what was dead, what was truly dead. He brings to life what was indisputably dead. But yesterday, in the past, Jesus said it wasn't going to be the end. He was God then, and he's God today. If you think about the first time God really appears in the Bible is the burning bush to Moses. He says, "I am." That phrase, if you read the history and sort of the background of the time, there were all these gods that were representative of different lands and different areas and things like that. So there was the god of this land and the god of this land and the god of that, and God introduces himself to Moses as "I am," and just blew away all the stereotypes that he couldn't be defined, that he is the God of yesterday, the God of today, and the God of tomorrow. This is funny. I think sometimes we forget to one of the scriptures in Romans. I have a good friend, and I'm sure many of you do. I have more than one good friends. It's kind of a joke, but so I have a few good friends that aren't saved. They're not Christian, you would say. And every time you invite them to church, "Oh, I can't go into the church building; it'll burn down. You're going to need a fire extinguisher." Anybody heard that before? Like, "Oh, I can't step foot in a church because it'll burn down." Well, Romans chapter 5, verse 8 says, "God demonstrated his own love toward us, that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us." See, the work that's being done in our lives today, I don't want to talk too much about that because Lori's going to talk next week about the God of today, but the work that's being accomplished in our lives today is because God did the work yesterday. Where we are today, he was yesterday. So he's with us today, but he's already been here. See, we're addicted to certainty, and that's why we live past to present rather than present to future. Often we wonder where God is in the midst of tragedy, but if we remember that one famous verse, "Jesus wept," essentially shows that Jesus was with Mary, Martha, and everyone that was mourning Lazarus' death the entire time. Jesus wept shows his humanity, his emotions behind the hurt and the pain of losing Lazarus, his friend. And so Jesus wept basically shows that he's been with us the entire time. So because help isn't on the way, oftentimes we think, well, when God shows up, that's when things will be set straight. Well, God's already here. Help's not on the way, it's already here. See, true trust is believing God's intentions towards you are always good. And that's the trust that we should have as we follow the Lord. There's two ways we can interpret Thomas in verse 16. We've looked at one kind already. It's pessimistically. He basically throws his hands up in the air and says, "All right, I guess we're just going to go there and die." And just sort of throws in the towel and gives up. But I wonder if maybe he wasn't concerned with the what. He was thinking of the why. He was, I think he was just willing to follow Jesus no matter the cost or the outcome. And that's really where we should be. Is we want God's will for our lives, and we've got to be willing to follow him, whatever that means. It may not mean that we're making cookies. We might not be making a cake. But the end result is going to be his will for our lives when we choose to place our trust in him and know that he's gone before us. Know that he's directing our steps. Brent, if you can come back up. I just want to sing a song real quick about how good he's been to us, about praising God in whatever circumstances we find ourselves in. So, some of us might be on the plateau. We might be life might be great. And it's easy to praise God. And some of us might be wondering, God, how did I get here? What's next? where am I going from here? Or maybe we know where we're going, but God hasn't opened the door for us yet. It hasn't been released to us yet. So as we sing this, a few lines of this song, I just challenge you to place your trust in Him, allow Him to direct your steps. Know that He's holding you by His hand, and that the mistakes that you make aren't the end. That Lazarus is in the tomb, and he's been in the tomb for 4 days, but Jesus is there to bring life and to bring healing and to bring resurrection and to guide you to where He wants you to be. If you're willing to put your trust in Him and you're willing to follow His direction and His leading. Oh, to think where I would be if not for you. To think where we would be if it wasn't for His direction. If we weren't able to trust in Him. If He didn't correct our mistakes.
You've been so good to me. You've been so good to me. Oh, to think where I would be if not for you, if not for you. 'Cause you've been so good to me. You've been so good to me. Oh, to think where I would be if not for you, if not for you. If ever I should lose my way, if ever I deny your grace, remind me of the price you've paid. Hallelujah. Oh, I'll live in remembrance. Yes, you've been so good to me. You've been so good to me. Oh, to think where I would be if not for you, oh, if not for you. As far as heights reach from the depths, as far as east is from the west, so far your grace has carried me, until I feel you face to face, until at last I've won my race. Remind me you're not finished with me yet. Hallelujah. Oh, hallelujah. Oh, hallelujah. Live in remembrance. Oh, you've been so good to me. So you've been so good to me. Oh, to think where I would be if not for you, if not for you. You've been so good to me. Yes, you've been so good to me. No, to think where I would be if not for you, Lord, if not not for you.
God, we don't want to focus on the past except that we look for you in it. We see that throughout our lives, you've been directing our steps. And the mistakes that we've made, you've held us with your hand and directed our steps further. God, we see your will being fulfilled in our lives. We ask that you would teach us to trust you, whether that means staying where we're at, even though we can see the next step, or maybe that's taking that next step. God, we just thank you for being so near to us, even when we didn't realize it. We thank you for bringing dead things to life. We thank you for showing us that you've gone before us, that you are with us, and that you've gone before us. God, speak to us. Continue to provide direction. Help us to see and to hear where you're taking us. God, we know that we're not going to see 10 steps into the future. But as long as you're guiding us, as long as we can see your light in front of us, we know that you're going before us. In Jesus' name. If you want prayer, there'll be a prayer team up here. So please don't leave before you've received ministry. But thank you for coming. Have a great day.